Hey, Christy, you know, one of the earliest dude ranches dating back to the early 1900s was a Skelton mountain ranch. It was the first dude ranch right here in Woodland Park.
This is where it all began. The call of the wild reached all sorts of people: businessmen, teachers, lawyers, and now a judge.
And though Judge William Skelton and his wife only had it 10 years, they made their mark. One guest was quoted, "Those who seek quietness can find it there, a summer's restful communion with nature."
Wow, Charlie, that was so poetic. William T. Skelton was born in the state of Maine in 1854. He married Miss Lizzie Chapman of Peoria, Illinois on May 21st, 1885. They had one son named William Jr.
William and Lizzie were longtime residents of St. Louis, Missouri, when President Grover appointed him to be a federal receiver of public funds for the United States government.
William was already a lawyer for the Burlington Railroad Company, which cut through the largely undeveloped plains of Colorado in 1882.
This became a stepping stone for his career. William T. Skelton was confirmed as an 8th Judicial District Judge while living in Akron, Colorado.
Though he was a Democrat, he was reelected twice in a Republican-controlled county. He was fair and known as a great benefactor to the poor.
It was the judge who was responsible for brokering a deal that provided free coal to the destitute families of Akron after suffering a major drought.
Both William and Lizzie had a great love for the outdoors. They would take retreats for several weeks at a time and explore the Colorado mountains.
It was during one of those trips that they decided on opening a guest ranch in the high country.
The Skeltons built their own slice of heaven. Their property spanned over 2,000 acres, but the dude ranch itself was seated on 400 acres. It was located just 3.5 miles north of the Woodland Park train depot.
On that ranch was a large chicken house, a huge 3-story barn, a herd of milk cows, and of course, horses.
The fresh air, the fresh food, you know, it was their beef, their vegetables and such. That was a big part of it too.
The ranch had 50 small cabins for guests and a main lodge with breathtaking views of Pikes Peak.
Judge Skelton, in his advertising, he mentioned that this was a place for wholesome people of good character to come visit.
In the evenings, Judge Skelton would entertain his guests with lively stories.
He was a very sociable guy and a cordial host, and always invited his neighbors and the people of Woodland Park to join in the happenings of the ranch.
Dancing was a big part of the dude ranch experience, the square dancing in the evening.
Going to Skelton was really entertaining, filled with all the mountain events that one would expect to find at a dude ranch.
According to an article from the Green Mountain Falls Gurgle, dating August 1915.
The more you go, the more you wish to go. The trip up to Skelton on a beautiful night is not excelled anywhere.
One activity was their 19-mile horseback ride to Colorado Springs with an overnight stay at the Alta Vista Hotel.
And believe me, the ride was not for the faint of heart. The judge personally led these adventures on their more spirited horses.
If you weren't an advanced rider, however, there were plenty of activities for all ages and levels of experience.
In fact, the surrounding El Paso County 4-H groups, as well as Boy Scout troops from several different states, used the ranch often.
It was not uncommon for the Skeltons to host up to 200 guests, which included folk mainly from the St. Louis area.
And I believe they offered a weekly rate of something around $15 a week. Probably just people of means that would have spent that kind of money and made the trip out here.
And even though they came here to rough it, The funny thing is they talk about, like, they had excellent food. They said at the Skelton Ranch, the women would bring 3 changes of clothes for every day. So even though they were roughing it, it was roughing it in style.
And being the first dude ranch in the region, the guests were treated to a tally-ho ride, which all started from the Woodland Park Depot and began their Western experience.
The Skelton Ranch is built on a ridge, and you would have to come up a ravine on that wagon from the train to get to it. It's a little bit spread out over a couple of ridges up there, but it has this amazing view of Pikes Peak and the valleys.
The Skeltons felt a deep spiritual connection with nature and the Creator, who carved out the beauty which surrounded them daily. They offered their guests clean mountain living for both body and soul.
And as practitioners of Christian Science, William and Lizzie believe that God is spirit and nature is actually spiritual and harmonious.
In their advertisement brochure, Life on a Mountain Ranch, Judge Skelton, an admirer of Western poetry, printed this poem by Frederick Sylvester for the cover.
I hear the wind in the pine trees and the answering song of the cones, and the thousands of reed-like needles scatter its silvery tones. And the wind goes down the valley and over the mountain leaps, but my heart forever the song of the pine tree keeps.
On Tuesday, June 23, 1908, a huge forest fire erupted. It took a force of 150 men to battle that blaze.
Out of those 150 men, there was only one brave woman, Lizzie Skelton. She wrapped herself in a wet blanket and while on horseback, risked her life to fight the flames.
The 75 guests staying at the ranch and all the horses and livestock thankfully escaped unharmed. However, 50 of the 75 buildings on the ranch, they were destroyed in the inferno.
It was in early summer, and Judge Skelton said that the resort was booked for 250 guests that year. It would have been their best season on record.
On that day, the local paper's headline read,
Fire sweeps Skelton Ranch, Pikes Peak Resort, frequented by St. Louisans, damaged $25,000.
That summer, they were still able to accommodate 100 guests while starting a $20,000 restoration project. The following spring, they completed another $50,000 in new renovations.
And they built a 64-room dormitory that was 2 stories and over 250 feet long. Each room was equipped with hot and cold running water and its own porcelain bathtub.
The Skelton Mountain Ranch operated from 1905 to 1916. They sold the ranch in 1917 to a St. Louis Shoe Company executive named F.A. Sudholt for a reported price of $40,000.
And he and his wife Lizzie retired to Colorado Springs.
By 1940, the Skelton Mountain Ranch had long been abandoned. That year, the United States Forest Service took back the land and placed it into the National Forest.
All the remaining buildings, such as the old dance hall and guest cabins, were demolished and removed.
Sadly, the decision was made because the groundwater that supplied the ranch had begun to dry up. A lack of water prevented any recreational facilities to be built in the area.
According to the Colorado Springs Gazette,
Famous old Skelton Dude Ranch will be returned to the primeval forest, September 1940.
So all we have left now are the chimneys and some of the foundations of the buildings to go back and see.
And you can find pieces of broken china and evidence of, of the living up there for sure. It's still there. You don't have to dig or anything. It's right on the surface.
And you get to that top of that ridge, and then you look through the woods and you try to find that first chimney, and then from there you find your way to the rest of what's left of the camp.
Judge Skelton's fairness and character were well respected by his critics. He and his wife, Lizzie, believed in living bold, generous, and compassionate lives, as taught in the Sermon on the Mount.
And whether it was advocating for the poor, for the children, or providing a mountain retreat to restore one's soul, William's epitaph on his tombstone summed it up quite well. I have finished the work thou gavest me.